Did you know that your emotions can alter the gut microbiome? Yes, your emotions affect the gut microbiome, and the gut microbiome affects the emotions. So, we've known for a long time that an unhealthy microbiome can affect mental health, but it works the other way too. I'm Jane Hogan. This is Wellness by Design, and this is what we're talking about today. I'm going to go over some of the science that's coming out about the relationship between the gut microbiome and emotions and the other way around. And also, I've got some practical tips for you. So, you're going to want to stay tuned to the end. So, why am I sharing this subject with you today? I heard Joe Dispenza on a podcast interview recently, and he was talking about how they've got the largest, so he does these 7-day events where people do meditations pretty much all day for 7 days. And that's really the only thing that's changing. They're out of their regular environment and they're in this meditation environment. And at the same time, he's got a bunch of scientists that are measuring all kinds of things. But one of the things they were measuring was the gut microbiome. What gut bacteria was in there and how did it change over these 7 days? And what he said was there's been huge changes in, the number of positive, I guess, microorganisms in the microbiome as a result of this 7 days of meditation. And they've been doing this for a while. He said they've got the largest database in the world now on the effects of meditation on the gut microbiome. So that's what got me interested in this, and I'm thinking about our emotions and how our nervous system, which of course is directly related to emotions, how that affects our gut microbiome. So let's dive into that a little bit more in a little bit more detail. And another reason why I'm really interested in this for my audience, which could be you with chronic pain, is that often we see chronic pain and poor gut health go together. So, whether it's the nervous system dysregulation that's resulted in a poor microbiome, or it could be the other way around, poor diet and lifestyle, medications, and so on have led to a poor gut microbiome, which then leads to um, uh, emotional problems and poor mental health, which then makes the nervous system uh, become dysregulated, which then can result in pain. So it's like a real like chicken or egg, which happens first, and it might be a combination of both. So if you're listening or watching this, I know that this is going to be helpful for you just to kind of have some little food for thought. We think of meditation as being just to calm us down and it just sort of create peace and calm for the nervous system. But we're also affecting the microbiome, and then that microbiome then affects us. I mean, we have way more cells in this body, in and on our body, that are non-human cells than human cells. I've heard different numbers, but sometimes people say 10 times more microorganism cells than human cells. But whether it's 8 or whether it's 10 or whether it's 100 times more, whatever, it's a lot. There's a lot more of them than us. So we are providing actually like a way for the microbiome to travel the world. And so we need a healthy microbiome in order for us to be healthy. And they need us to be healthy for them to have a host to live on. So um, we're interrelated. We really are interrelated. And in fact, I remember hearing this years ago that the gut microbiome actually talks to our mitochondria because the mitochondria, so that's the energy producers that are in every single cell of our, pretty much every cell in our body, they are actually ancient bacteria. And so I guess these bacteria have their bacteria language that they can speak to each other. All right, so let's just talk about the gut brain axis. So, if we're talking about the connection between the gut and the brain, we're talking about the gut brain axis. There's communication, it's a two-way communication between the gut and the brain. And so, one way, there's three ways really. There's neural pathways, there's hormones, and there's also immune responses. So the neural pathways, mostly that's the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is that wandering nerve it's the biggest nerve in the body, and it attaches to all of our major organs and then comes up through the neck and to the brain. And we do know that there are, I forget now how many, if it's 10 times more. Anyway, no, it's like 80% of the fibers are ascending fibers as opposed to descending fibers. So in other words, this communication is happening mostly from the gut up to the brain. So there's signals going up that way about what's going on down here. So that's the vagus nerve. It's the major communication route between the gut and the brain. And then there's also hormonal signals. So hormones like cortisol are going to be like messengers, right? And we can think of actually them like that they are messengers. And then the immune responses as well. So our gut microbiome influences inflammation and immune function. So the gut microbiome is sitting like right on the inside of our gut, which is kind of like outside of our body. If you think of it as our gut being like a tube that runs all through our body. And sitting on the other side, the inside of us, excuse me, is our immune system. And so we have about 80% of our immune system or so residing just outside that gut lining. So there's a lot of communication that can happen there, especially if we get leaky gut. So let's talk about those in a little bit more detail now. The vagus nerve, major pathway, the gut bacteria influences that vagal signaling, which then affects our brain activity and also regulation of our emotions. So that vagus nerve, it is when that gets activated, that does activate the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. That's that rest, digest, repair state of the nervous system. And often what can happen is we lose vagal tone, and so we're not getting the signals that need to go through when we get a dysregulated nervous system. So the chemical signaling happens through neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, and that enters the bloodstream and then can then affect brain function. So about 90% of of serotonin, which is kind of called the feel-good hormone, is produced in the gut. So if our gut microbiome is off, we're not getting that feel-good neurotransmitter. And then when we don't feel good and we have negative emotions, then that dysregulates the nervous system, and then that causes the gut microbiome to not be as healthy. And so we get this circular thing happening. Also, short chain fatty acids. Now, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm going to read what it says here. So short chain fatty acids, bacterial fermentation of dietary fibers produces short chain fatty acids like butyrate, which can affect the brain function and inflammation. And these also cross what's called the blood-brain barrier. So we have a blood-brain barrier that separates our brain from the rest of us. And these short chain fatty acids can cross that and influence our actual neural activity. And let's talk about immune system modulation then. So the gut bacteria play a crucial role in the immune system because they help regulate immune responses, which can impact inflammation levels in the brain. And chronic inflammation is in the brain, especially, is associated with various mood disorders and neurodegenerative diseases. And then we've got endocrine signaling. So gut bacteria can influence the production of hormones that affect our mood and our stress response. For example, they can modulate the levels of cortisol, and that's our primary stress hormone in the body. So we've got this gut microbiome that's influencing the levels of cortisol. Now, our emotions, of course, influence the level of cortisol as well, but then our gut microbiome is also involved with that. And then the gut microbiome also produce metabolites that can affect brain health. So these include vitamins like B vitamins and other compounds that influence our energy, and how we metabolize all the energy and brain function. And then also the gut microbiome affects the gut barrier. So you probably heard about leaky gut. When all this first happened to me with my health, leaky gut was kind of new, but it's been around for a while now. That was 8 years ago when all this first happened. Now, most people I think have heard this leaky gut syndrome or heard about what the gut barrier problems or intestinal permeability. So that when we have a healthy gut bacteria, then that helps maintain the integrity of that barrier. When we have unhealthy gut bacteria and we have, the wrong kinds, they can literally eat away at the intestinal lining, and then that causes the permeability, then that triggers the immune system and so on, that can cause pain and inflammation and also affect our brain function. And then we've also got this is really wild, but there's been studies on this that that gut bacteria can actually influence behaviors and emotional states directly. So, for example, certain bacterial strains have been associated with reduced anxiety like behaviors in animal models. So, we've got this impact, right, between the microbiome and a lot of other factors of health, but also including behaviors. Now, let's talk about what I really want to talk about, and that's the effect of emotions on the gut microbiome. So there is some research. So besides what Joe Dispenza is doing, there is some research on how stress and negative emotions can alter gut bacteria. So there was a study done, this was back in 2012, actually. And this study reviewed, it was a review article. And so explored the interactions between the gut microbiome and the central nervous system, including how stress can affect the microbiome diversity and the composition. So we found that, or they found that there was actually a connection. So this was back in 2012, so it was a while ago. So there's also been numerous studies and meta studies on the effects of anxiety and depression on gut health. And so this other study said that it was a review article and examined the relationship between gut microbiota and mental health, specifically focusing on depression. And they found that there were alterations in gut microbiota composition can influence these neurobiological pathways that we've talked about already associated with mood disorders. So they have evidence suggesting that dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of gut bacteria, can contribute to the development of depression through mechanisms like inflammation and neurotransmitter production and, that gut-brain axis that we were talking about. And then we know that there is this influence on emotional health. So obviously this is not a podcast about depression and anxiety, but just to let you know that there is a connection between anxiety, depression, and gut health. So there's, again, numerous studies linking gut health to mental well-being. So there's a study in the Nutrients magazine, the overview that said they examined the efficacy of probiotics as a treatment for depression and anxiety. Now, first of all, I want to say the evidence isn't saying that probiotics is an effective treatment for anxiety and depression. Some later studies did find that they did help the medications. So probiotics in conjunction with medications was helpful or promising anyway. So so it's definitely not, probiotics wouldn't be a way for you to treat anxiety or depression, but there is this relationship. So this other study found that the potential mechanisms for that may be because the this helped increase BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor, and also decreases C-reactive protein, which is a protein associated with inflammation. So, when we're talking about dysbiosis, we know that we have dysbiosis, it can lead to increased intestinal permeability, which leads to inflammation. We know that the neurotransmitter productions, serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, that because the microbiome plays a critical role in the production of those, then if we have an imbalanced microbiome, then it may be disrupting that production. We know that when we have dysbiosis, so again, dysbiosis is an imbalance of bacteria, so not a good balance of beneficial bacteria, but maybe not so much beneficial, and more of the non-beneficial or harmful bacteria. So the stress response, we know that dysbiosis can affect the HPA axis. So that's the hypothalamic, the pituitary, and the adrenal, they really work together for stress, which they regulate the body's stress response. And so an imbalance in the microbiome may lead to an overactive or even an underactive HPA axis, so elevated cortisol levels and so on. And also we know that the gut-brain communication then, because that follows through there, can be altered as well with dysbiosis. So all of this to kind of to say that, of course, we know it's kind of undisputed that there is a connection between the gut microbiome and our mental health, and the state of our brain, how much stress and our emotions. We've known this for a while. And this has led to a lot of people to really look at diet and lifestyle factors. So, we know that diet can affect the microbiome. So having diets that are rich in fiber and fruits and vegetables is generally helpful. We know that some fermented foods are helpful. The foods that are not helpful generally are processed foods and foods that are really high in sweeteners. That tends to drive up the poor bacteria. We also know that a lot of medications can really alter the gut microbiome as well. And there's a lot of talk about probiotics, and are probiotics helpful? They may be. I know my naturopath used to say that it's always better to get your probiotics from food as opposed to taking something, because if you don't have the environment that's going to support a healthy microbiome, so in other words, if you're still stressed, right, if you're still eating foods that support unhealthy bacteria, then taking a probiotic isn't really going to be helpful very much, because it's more about providing the right terrain for the microbiome. Okay, so it's kind of like, if you think about it like a vegetable garden, right? If we want to grow a vegetable garden, we wouldn't put the vegetables in crappy rocky soil and then expect that if we just put some fertilizer on once in a while that they would do well, right? We know we have to take care of the soil. I know my brother-in-law is a big gardener. He says you take care of the soil and the soil takes care of the plants. In the same way, we take care of the terrain, and then that will take care of the microbiome. So let's get back to the mind-body approaches, because that's really what I want to talk about, because this is where there's a lot of power. So there's power. You have power with your lifestyle choices, with the foods that you eat and so on. But you also have a lot of power. And I think probably I don't have any studies on this, but I know that our thoughts, what we're thinking, and our stress levels really have a huge impact on our nervous system. And that is going to have an impact on the microbiome. So, getting back to what we learned from Joe Dispenza, and that is they were doing these week-long meditations and really seeing some results. So we know that some of these mind-body approaches work. So meditation is one. So how does this work? It reduces stress and anxiety, both of those affect gut health negatively. And so if we're promoting relaxation, like meditation, it helps lower cortisol levels, and that can also improve the gut brain communication. So, that gut brain axis communication. So, regular meditation has been associated with reduced inflammation, improved digestion, better overall gut health. And also, it encourages just awareness of bodily sensations. So, when we're aware of what's going on, like, hey, when I eat this, I don't kind of, I notice there's a lot of gurgling or something going on. So we're going to pay more attention to how do we respond to food? How does our gut feel in relation to our mood? I mean, it's no surprise. A lot of people say when they feel nervous, right? Where do you feel nervous? You feel nervous in your gut. And a lot of people will end up, getting diarrhea or something, right? We know that we have these responses to in our gut, to our thoughts and feelings and our emotional state. So another mind body approach that could be helpful is yoga. So we know that yoga, as well as it can be very meditative, but it's also a lot of physical postures and breathing exercises and meditation. So it's all combined. And these together help reduce stress and promote relaxation. And the practice enhances vagal tone as well. So that vagus nerve that we talked about, that when we're doing the exercises and the postures and movements in yoga, it helps tone the vagus nerve, and so we improve that communication between the gut and the brain. And then any other practices with mind, like a mind body connection, like body scans and so on. These just foster awareness on how our emotions and stress affect our physical health. And that can lead to healthier lifestyle choices when we start paying attention, right, to how our body is responding to thoughts and feelings. In my community, it's pain. Like, a lot of times people will notice that they have more pain when they have negative thoughts. And sometimes they're not even really aware of how their constant negative thinking is actually producing pain in the body, because it's adding to inflammation, it's adding to nervous system dysregulation. So anytime we've got some of these holistic approaches, they can really help with gut issues, by promoting less stress and promoting a healthier lifestyle. Okay, so some practices you might want to consider are incorporating probiotics and prebiotics. So let's talk about that. So probiotic food, these are like foods that are alive. So things like kimchi, um, sauerkraut, uh, different like apple cider vinegar, different kombucha, right? These types of foods, they're like living, right? And probably yogurt that you would make yourself, not store-bought yogurt, because a lot of times the probiotic just isn't really alive anymore, or not enough of it. Now, prebiotic foods are fibers, right? That's the food that feeds. It's funny, prebiotic foods are the foods that feed the bacteria. So actually, they feed the bacteria. They feed the bacteria. And so the foods that are good prebiotic foods are, fibers and fruits and vegetables and so on. Sugars, not so much. Um, Having a daily mindfulness practice. So if you don't, I'm not saying you got to meditate every day or do like, what Joe Dispenza does in his events all day, most of the day for 7 days, although probably if you wanted to try it, and it's my hope that I get to one of his retreats one of these days to try it out. But obviously, the more time that we can create feeling relaxed and calm, the more that's going to help the gut microbiome, because we are, through all those pathways that we talked about, we are going to be increasing the beneficial bacteria in the gut microbiome. And then also, you might want to think about keeping a food and mood journal. So this is something I have for my clients and my students, is a food, mood, poop, and pain journal, because my people have pain. So it's keeping track of noticing how you feel when you eat certain foods. Like, I had a client one time, and she said every time she ate potato chips, she got anxiety, and she didn't realize it. And she ate potato chips for years. But once we started working together and she was starting to pay attention more, she realized that this happened. So maybe you see some connections between food and your mood, right? Um, and it's a powerful tool. I wouldn't say do it all the time, but maybe try keeping a journal for a week or so and see how you feel. And then so let's talk about what you could do as a daily action then. I suggest that you try to do that. Try to pay attention to what you're eating, and then notice how your mood is affected. And then notice also, if you start doing a mindfulness practice, or maybe you do daily yoga or something like that, some kind of practice where it's a mind body experience, and notice how does that affect your gut health. Do you notice any difference in gut health? And do you notice maybe you have better poops, or maybe you have less gas, or less bloating, or less constipation or diarrhea? So a lot of these things kind of go together and are really affected by that mind body experience. Okay. All right. So I encourage you to give this a try. So I like to end with what's one thing you can do today that's going to initiate that healing response in your body, because you can initiate the healing response in your body. And I think, one of the number one things to do is just spending a few moments every day in mindfulness. Now, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can just be noticing your breathing. Set a timer for 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever you have. And just see if you can just focus on your breathing. Not Your mind will wander to things in the past and things in the future, but as you notice it doing it, you just come back and refocus again on your breathing. So try that out. Try that out and notice over time how it makes you feel more calm. And when you feel more calm, you will be improving your gut health as well. Let me know in the comments how this works for you. It might take a while. Maybe you need to try this out and then come back. Let me know if this helped you feel better. Did you feel like you had a more healthy gut as a result of having some kind of mindfulness practice? And also, I encourage you to stay tuned for some future episodes. I got some great guests coming up. Got Margie Bissinger. She's talking about the connection with osteoporosis and pain. And also, I've got Michael Rosaline, and we're talking emotions again, emotions and how that affects our physical health. So I'm excited about those. Stay tuned. And don't forget to rate, subscribe, review, share, do all those things, whether you're listening to this podcast or whether you're watching it on YouTube. And if you are listening to this, maybe you want to go to YouTube to watch it. And if you're watching it on YouTube, maybe sometimes you might want to listen to it. There's the great thing about listening is that you can do this while you're doing something else. So maybe while you're getting your supper ready, or while you're out for a walk, or while you're driving. If you do any amount of driving, podcasts are great for that. Thank you so much for being here today. I look forward to connecting with you again on the next episode of Wellness by Design.